Good morning. Good morning, everybody. So those that are still out there, if you can gravitate here into the conference room, it would be good. I know that. Welcome to the 2022 Indigenous Peoples Summit. Let's really give ourselves.
Indigenous.
August 9th has been declared by the United Nations as the day to remember and to honor Indigenous peoples' contribution to our common humanity. And today, I want to start by acknowledging and expressing gratitude to the Omaha Nation for allowing us to flourish on their sacred land. I will not be able to name everyone present here from the Omaha Nation, but if you would stand up, that would be very helpful. Our elder here, John Papan, Dr. Rudy Mitchell, Jeff, who led us in prayer, also Mike from the Omaha Nation as well, Vernon Miller, former Chairman Vernon Miller. A big round of applause. And I am not a historian, so I will not claim to know everything, but I know there are many other indigenous groups too, so if I don't mention all of them, please forgive me. We're honored to have here the chairman of the Iowa and tribe of Kansas and Nebraska, Timothy Road, here. And Vice Chairman here, Lance Foster. So, is there anyone else from any other indigenous nation that is present and I haven't forgotten? And a little bit, I'll get to Maya territory here. And this morning, before we hear from anyone else, we will hear from the General Governor of Belize, who will send us a pre-recorded message. She wanted to be here with us but couldn't, but there's a delegation here of Belize. If you could stand up and really... Narciso Torres, Elder Narciso Torres is an authority when it comes to the Milpa cycle and also our agroforestry system, and this is why he is up here with us today. Ambassador of the Garifuna Nation, Ambassador at Large, and our Elder Felicita from Maya Territory, Belize, with us. This event would not have been possible with support from the volunteers, staff, board members, so many people involved in philanthropy. We have with us here today the representation of the Omaha Community Foundation. Is Laura Contreras here yet? She was present with us and also at the ceremony, so maybe they took a little break. But we are supported by Sherwood, the Omaha Community Foundation, the Whites Family Foundation here in the city of Omaha. The list is really long. I cannot read all of and every single one of them, but really thank you for the support for our local support here that makes our organization viable here in the city of Omaha. But I would like to express special thank you to Oatley, who, if you would, Katie, stand up, supported the conference, but also our representation from the Nature Conservancy. If anyone, if you would stand up, the Nature Conservancy would stand up here. Thank you for sponsoring this event. Again, I am here trying to be the best interpreter that I can be for the Maya, particularly the Maya women. This organization is run by the Maya women, and as my superior to the government, Maya government walks out, I was going to recognize her, but she is busy preparing a gift and a surprise for everyone here. But my wife, my life partner somewhere, Juana, also busy, you know, preparing something very special for everyone. So in that spirit, I ask a round of applause to the Maya women in particular. And our elder, Sebastiana, over here, Sebastiana is, will be leading the Ministry of Health of the Canjobal Maya government here. So, Sebastiana, thank you. Malchiosh kawe, yuhual chiosh chikay. And there, Lola Marina Juan is my superior from the Maya government, also cooking a spiritual meal for us this morning. Before we get to see a recorded message from the governor, the general governor of Belize, I really want to introduce you, or I should say I want to introduce to you our moderators for this conference, Professor David Pantos, if you would stand up. Professor David Pantos is someone that really fights for the rights of indigenous peoples. When genocide was being committed against us, he was working and defending and standing up for our rights within UNO systems. But also, Marta Lidia, if you would stand up. Marta is our an emerging star, a shining star within the Maya nation here. Only speaks 4 languages according to her. I think she is on to her 5th, I don't know, language. But Marta will be moderating along with Professor David Pantos. I will ask my creator to forgive me if I forgot to mention anyone, our elders in particular, everyone visiting us here at the conference, the Vice Chancellor of the Institute for Agriculture and Natural Resources at UNL, if you would stand up, and Bernardo Montoya, someone that has been promoting us since our beginnings in 2007. Thank you. A big round of applause to everyone here present. In the interest of time, I will ask and see if the video is ready to be presented. Today, in the sacred calendar is Lahkaweb Tihash. Tihash is this energy of healing. Tihash is what my ancestors used to perform surgeries. And today is the day to heal. When we come together at this conference, at the 2022 Indigenous Peoples Summit, we are going to hear voices from our government officials, government officials of indigenous peoples, from academia, from philanthropy, from policy making. We want all of these voices to be heard. We want to come together and have a conversation about healing our common humanity and healing Mother Earth. With that,
Indigenous sustainable development contributes to global solution. The age of the other has arrived.
Our General Governor of Belize.
Tia Santo Hugo, Timuchanon tek inadahi, Tika tivila tibikiti helikesh timeya each communal titula kalon. Ista kontikesh. Good day to you all. Thanks to the sacred mountain and valley that we are gathered today to share how we can work together for the benefit of all. I formally salute you. During the COVID pandemic, there were earnest discussions regarding the development of a new norm in our social, economic, and political institutions, and how to use this period as an opportunity to do things better. In essence, there were discussions on how to achieve the 17 Sustainable Development Goals in order to give ourselves and the ecosystems we depend on a chance of survival. We saw how the most vulnerable, indigenous peoples, women, children, persons with disabilities, minorities, people of color, and older persons face limitations on their rights to food and land, housing, livelihoods, and other basic necessities. As the world continues to recover from the pandemic, climate change continues to severely hamper our attempts at achieving the SDGs. Once more over the summer, we saw unprecedented heat waves, drought, and flooding across the world. Anthropocene factors explain why we continue to be in a perpetual crisis mode, and I would argue that it is Western Anthropocene systems that are to be held accountable for the precarious state that we are in. It is important to bear in mind what Indigenous activist Takaya Blaney from the Tzalam Nation articulated when she spoke about the intersections of racial and climate justice. She said, "When you mobilize people around climate without acknowledging intersections of racial justice, indigenous sovereignty, and how climate change disproportionately affects and profoundly impacts Black, Indigenous, and people of color, you mobilize people who aren't willing to question colonialism or any of those structures that are actually responsible for climate change." Understanding history has to include an analysis of power. As Sapiro, a political scientist, puts it, the analysis of power is an essential part of the study of politics, and one too often ignored. It can provide a handle on understanding how cultural norms become integrated into the actions of human beings, how people act and interact with different systems of rules and social expectations, why and how systems of stigma operate in everyday life, how people cope with being victims of inequality and stigma, and what its effect is on them. Understanding how power works is important for Indigenous people and others who lack it, so that they can participate meaningfully for the benefit of humanity. Failure to do so means that we will continue to make the same mistakes, thinking that we are somehow different because we are younger or have access to more information, but have not truly changed our fundamental understanding of how global systems work. I have argued elsewhere about the impact of Western education on Indigenous people. I have anecdotal evidence to suggest that Indigenous people who attend Western education systems can become our greatest enemy from within. Their Western values and native values are often at odds when dealing with land, equity, and other issues. I therefore repeat, we cannot treat environmental justice, racial injustice, and discrimination as distinct or unrelated issues, nor refrain from understanding their historical roots. Environmental injustices often spring from systemic racism and other forms of discrimination that are now prohibited under international human rights law. We have seen how racial minorities and other communities who have faced historic and structural discrimination often face greater risk for environmental harms while being left out of environmental policy discussions. So how do we bring others to the table where decisions are being made? In my role as Governor-General of Belize, I am always seeking new ways for how the state can support the renewal of the social contract with its Indigenous people. One way is by helping to develop legislation and policies that foster innovation, productivity, and environmental stewardship to create a more just and inclusive society for all citizens. This is easier said than done. The reality is that over 500 years of interaction has left a history of taking by force without permission. First, it was our lands and resources. Now, indigenous knowledge systems are being appropriated to help answer some of the global questions of climate change. The power imbalance meant that indigenous voices were absent from the conversation for very long. But now that we are participating, we have to find new ways of engaging and of being. Our first step is acknowledgement of past wrongs and creating opportunities to redress. This is a necessary step towards reconciliation and to slowly build back the trust between indigenous people and others. That alone is a political hurdle that is being met with different degrees of resistance. Nonetheless, indigenous people and others of color all over the world continue asking uncomfortable questions from their states and demanding innovative ways of development. Belize, as a young nation, 41 years old, is slowly beginning to address its colonial legacy. There are a myriad of issues that require a mature level of reflection when we talk about difficult topics such as reparation, not only for African descendants, but also other people who are forced to be a part of the system. The indigenous Maya in Belize are now at a seminal moment of a potential paradigm shift to fully embrace a pluralistic culture rather than multiculturalism. We have a legal judgment that affirms communal property as a form of property that requires protection in the same manner as private property. This declaration in 2007 was a clear example of legal pluralism of a cultural group in Belize. Belize has many opportunities to get it right, and embracing rights-based democracy is one way to promote civil and political rights and economic, social, and cultural rights. Just as the COVID pandemic illustrated how intertwined and vulnerable we are, the war in Ukraine, one of the major waste baskets in the world, is forcing us to rethink our relationship with how food is produced and its impact on social and natural ecosystem. The world continues to experience major upheaval in how it feeds and satisfies basic human needs. The United Nations Security Council pointed out in 2019 that climate change has a multiplier effect on peace and security. This means human-induced environmental changes will exacerbate the inequalities and injustices within our borders and across nations. Therefore, while climate change is a global issue, it has very local repercussions. The issues and problems we face are huge and almost overwhelming. How do we as individuals have any say or agency over matters that are so critical to our everyday existence? One strategy is food sovereignty. Broadly speaking, food sovereignty is different from the right to food in that it centers on social movements and addresses the dynamics of power and the action of people between social movements and formal institutions, while the right to food has a more state-focused legal approach. Both are right-based approaches. Indigenous people and other advocates of food sovereignty recognize that what makes us human is that we are connected to our physical environment and that our food is not separated from the values and the ecosystem of the worlds it emanates from. We can see that the current global food system that we are a part of hides the social, environmental, and cultural costs and operates beyond the ecological limits of our regions, localities, and planet. Food sovereignty is one movement where rural communities and indigenous people promote longer-term national, regional, and international networks and political action. Done well, it can contribute to positive rural development and environmental justice. It is a framework first proposed by the peasant farmers of La Via Campesina in the 1990s, and their 7 principles of food sovereignty attempts to capture this holistic approach. Their principles focus on how food is a basic human right, the need for agrarian reform, protection of natural resources, reorganization of food trade to support local food production, reducing multinational concentration of power, fostering peace, and increasing democratic control of the food system. These principles connect the dots of chopping down trees in the developing world to sending refrigerated cargo across the planet in planes and ships, to industrialized food systems contributing to large quantities of greenhouse gases, among other social issues. In the spirit of advocating for systemic and not individual approaches to complex problems, I have the following recommendations based on my professional experience as an Indigenous person advocate. There needs to be state support for the protection of Indigenous people's knowledge system. The state of Belize endorsed its free prior informed consent protocol earlier this year in an attempt to have good faith consultations with its indigenous people on development activities that will affect them. This will help to mitigate some of the inherent power imbalances. More needs to be done, including the provision of legal support for indigenous people to help make and enforce decisions. Further international legal instruments are needed in the area of indigenous intellectual property rights, particularly with regard to the last recommendation. Legal instruments can help define traditional knowledge and traditional cultural expressions, who the right holders are, how competing claims can be resolved, and what rights and exceptions should be applied. For instance, a key concern in the intersection of indigenous knowledge with intellectual property law has also been the inevitable translation of indigenous knowledge systems into frameworks of Western property, complete with the principles of alienation, exclusion, and exclusive possession. Such property systems are often not culturally compatible, as the translation into Western paradigms requires foundational transformation in how knowledge is understood and how it is shared. Western worldview creates their own system, just like indigenous peoples' worldviews have their own. I recognize that not all indigenous peoples' traditional systems are the same. UNDRIP, United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, was a major milestone and a necessary foundation to what I hope can be the development of appropriate frameworks for access and use of indigenous knowledge and knowledge practices. These international instruments have proven useful in affirming rights, but people power and education are equally vital to have these rights become meaningful to ordinary people. Research is needed to help bridge the gap between practice and policy. I have always been wary of armchair intellectuals. There is so much good work being done by millions of people that can contribute to global solutions. How can best practice be documented to produce data that can be shared globally? Sometimes we need to convince our own people of the merits of our own systems of knowledge, because unless a Western scientist validates it, it is not real science. Formal education programs designed around traditional ecological knowledge have provided indigenous students with both actionable farming techniques and a sense of broader possibilities for meeting indigenous people's needs. How this information can be shared without further appropriation of our knowledge system is still a work in progress, but partnerships are one way we can learn more about each other and determine if best practice can be scaled up or if they work best in niche environments. Here are some examples. A study in Guatemala found that farmers strengthen their food security by combining traditional milpa farming practices and off-farm employment opportunities within rural areas, which gave them more flexibility to invest in their local food systems. Another research showed that a policy shift from community land tenure to individual land titles resulted in fragmentation of grazing lands in Kenya, which undermined food security along with social structures and ecosystems resilience. Work is now underway to restore community land tenure for the Maasai pastoralists in Olgos, Kenya. Research established that conservation policies can also restrict access to land for agriculture, hunting, and gathering, with negative impacts on indigenous peoples' food sovereignty, as documented in Oaxaca, Mexico, and Sulawesi, Indonesia. Farmers organized to take back the right to practice shifting agriculture in an Indonesian national park, increasing their food supply and security. This particular topic, shifting cultivation, also known as slash and burn in English, is a topic that has come full circle in that it was initially viewed with deep suspicion by bureaucrats and conservationists to now being accepted as a way to protect and promote biodiversity globally. Research on food sovereignty can highlight the social and economic constraints that determine people's choices. In Haiti, one study reported that poor people's food preferences were shifting toward more processed and less nutritious foods, and that social inequities, especially race and class, underpin a cultural devaluation of more nutritious peasant foods. In Belize, the ban of fast food around primary schools to counter cheap and highly processed food from being sold to children is an attempt to provide better nutrition. There is a state-supported school feeding program for rural children, including indigenous children, to counter the normal diet of crisp and brightly colored sugar water. It is in practice that we realize that perhaps our ideas are not well thought out and can be improved. The food being served in school is non-indigenous. Rice and not corn, battery-produced chicken, and very little traditional vegetables or fruit is on the menu. It has proven difficult to reach out to local farmers and develop a food sovereignty system rather than food security and nutrition. The accompanying cookbook was based on an urban diet and did little to deconstruct how choices are made. It is clear that more education and outreach is needed to help us rewire how we make choices, as our Indigenous activists noted earlier. The long-term aim of food sovereignty can also promote the equality of local foods being produced and their nutritional impact, and in time be included in the local and national recipe book. Nonetheless, food sovereignty can be a forum for bringing experts such as farmers to exchange information on how to improve productivity and promote diversity in accordance with local customs. Many Indigenous people were practicing agroecology, as this type of system was inseparable from their traditional knowledge system. I recall a farm being set up in our region for students from Western universities to learn agroecology, not from local farmers, but from one of their own. Yet, most of the knowledge came from the local environment. Going forward, there may not be one model or method that fits all, but rather that some may be suited sui generis in community, local context space. The diversity of models is good for innovation and resilience. The pandemic, the global supply chain crisis, inflation, and other political upheavals are not allowing anyone to sit back and return to the way things were done before. The social, economic, political systems are failing, and the global crisis continues to reveal that there is much that can be done by grassroots movement in partnership with states and transnationals to do things better. Botik. Thank you.
These are a few words from Her Excellency Froya Tzalam, and I ask the delegation to please take our gratitude to her for this powerful, powerful message. Thank you. Before we continue to the next item on the program, I want to acknowledge the presence of the city of Omaha represented by Yesenia. If you would stand up, please, Yesenia. And so, thank you. And I know that Her Honor might join us later as well. And we have our friends from the Smithsonian Institute. If you would stand up, please welcome to the 2022 conference here. And yesterday we missed Professor from Harvard University. If you would stand up, Dr. Stephen Cornell, also acknowledge his presence here. And so we're going to have a lot of time to get together, establish conversations, get to know one another. And so now, if the are we ready? Estamos listos. And so, and the sound system. This is how we, as the Maya people, established Jurisgenesis, jurisdiction and jurisprudence over our territory. And it is our also hope that, and Pascual and Lola will be here with us and will be explaining more about this presentation, this dance presentation. And so let's welcome them.
Ahora hay que disfrutar una danza preparada por los adolescentes de la descendencia maya Canjobal. Now we are ready to enjoy a dance prepared by the youth of the Canjobal Mayan descendants.
Hace miles de años,
thousands of years ago,
en donde los cerros y montañas eran lugares del jaguar,
where the hills and mountains were places of the jaguar,
Ambalam,
Kambalam,
del Wofbat,
Wotbats,
el Solol
of Solol,
y muchas aves.
and many birds.
tierras donde vivían nuestros abuelos y abuelas de Joloncono con sus familias.
Lands where our grandfathers and grandmothers lived.
Para nuestros ancestros, todos los lugares son sagrados,
For our ancestors, all places are sacred.
por lo que decidieron agradecer por las energías del cosmos.
For what they decided to thank for the energies of the cosmos,
De la Madre Tierra,
of Mother Earth,
llevando sus ofrendas
carrying their offerings
y alimentos
and food
como koshosh,
as koshos,
maíz en grano y molido,
grain and ground corn,
pishtum,
pistum,
tortillas y frijol,
tortillas and beans.
además de vegetales como el soloj,
In addition to vegetables such as tolo,
sal de piedra
stone salt,
y utensilios de barro para la cocción de sus alimentos.
and clay utensils for cooking your food.
En cada lugar que descansaron,
In each place they rested,
ofrecieron incienso,
they offered incense,
pom,
pon,
estoraque
storax,
y plantas aromáticas
and aromatic plants
para agradecer la diversidad de la madre naturaleza.
to please the diversity of Mother Nature.
Así reconocieron el lugar como Huaxaclacún.
This is how they recognize the place as Huaxalacún.
Luego siguieron su camino,
Then they went on their way,
descansaron en Otrimosh,
rested at Xochitimosh,
en donde llegaron al nacimiento del agua
where they arrived at the source of the water
y lo llamaron Nuqa,
and called it Nuka.
mientras que al continuar su recorrido
While continuing their journey,
divisaron un río que llamaron Tiamimán o Yichcán.
they spotted a river that they called it Ichaminam or Yichkan.
En el Tiamimán los ancestros se reunieron en un patcún
In Ichaminam, the ancestors met in Patskun.
y acordaron establecerse en Xochimosh.
And agreed to establish Xochitimosh.
Thank you.
Thank you. Un fuerte aplauso más para todos, para los jóvenes. This is the emerging concept among intellectuals from Native American. Here, they talk about jurisgenesis, and this is how you establish jurisgenesis, your sacred sites, your sacred seeds. Then you can have jurisprudence and jurisdiction.